for the motion pictures and telling stories. So I'm Craig Caton, chair of the animation department here at the New York Film Academy, and this is Matt Galuppo.
Hi, I'm Matt Galuppo. I'm the associate chair, and today on the lecture, I will be playing the part of you guys. I will be playing the audience kind of here to proxy ask questions. Right now, we are actually streaming. Is it streaming? Can I say streaming? I'm saying streaming. We are streaming from the NYFA Twitch studio that is in Burbank Studios. For those of you gamers out there, we are literally right below where Overwatch League streams from. So a lot of cool gaming stuff going on right here in this building. Before we get started, Craig, I would love it if you could give a little bit of your credits and a little bit of your background.
Okay, yeah. All right. So me in a nutshell, I started out doing visual effects, special effects, makeup, and creature works, and I worked on a lot of movies in the '80s, like Ghostbusters and Big Trouble in Little China, and the Terminator movies, and Tremors, Edward Scissorhands, Beetlejuice, and of course, I was in charge of all the Raptors for Jurassic Park. And then from there, I segued into doing digital work, and so I worked at Disney Feature Animation for 15 years, with my last film there being Tangled, and also working at DreamWorks Animation for 5 years as well.
So everywhere. Craig, you are responsible for my childhood. It's what I have learned. You raised me more than my parents did. That's crazy.
That's sad.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm such a horrible parent.
Yeah. Also, a shout out to All American High School Film Festival. Thanks so much for partnering us on this.
All American High School.
Yes. Thanks so much for partnering on this and being a big part of this show and this stream today. Real quick aside, if you guys have questions, please intro into the chat, say them into the chat, and we're going to try to pepper them throughout the stream. There will be a time at the end where you can come and just kind of do more free flow. But if the question is particularly relevant, go for it. If you're confused, go for it. If audio cuts out or if there are any technical issues, you guys are our eyes and ears. We're here for you, so please let us know in the chat. That's the fun part about this. That's why we're live and it's not a recording. Great. Thanks, guys. Without any further ado.
All right, I'm going to start it out. A couple of years ago, I was working in a previs house, and
can you just previs?
Previs. Let's talk about previs.
Yeah,
so previs is where you work with the director of a movie before a movie ever gets started, and you create little animated cartoons to help the director describe how action sequences are going to work out, and for pacing and timing and what we're going to need for effects and stuff like that. Can you add to that?
Yeah, I think it's the storyboarding of the modern era.
That's right.
And they're the first people to ever touch a film. So that's kind of the context in which all this is happening.
So anyway, I was working there, and I was doing previous stuff, but nobody knew that I was actually a person who created monsters for a living and made a good living doing that. And so this was kind of how the whole thing went down. And so we'll go to the first slide and look at that.
Yeah, they can see it right now.
Okay, great. They see the slide. Yeah. Great. So they started out by saying, "Oh, let's put a big muscular guy there because muscular guys are scary." So they started out with a muscular guy, and then after that they said, "Hey, next slide. Let's give him lots of tentacles. Let's have lots and lots of tentacles coming out of his back, and it'll be really, really cool." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then they said, "Hey, you know what'd be even cooler than that? What if we gave him great big talons or scything talons for hands? Great big blades." And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, "Hey, that's interesting, all right." But then I asked, so what is this creature character? What does he have to do in the story? What is this thing? And they said, "Oh yeah. In the first scene, he goes to the phone and he calls his best friend." And I'm looking at him and going, "Really? He's gonna pick up a phone with those giant talons and call his best friend?" And then they thought "Oh yeah, maybe we should rethink this a little bit." So that led to me to some thinking about how what is the process that I use to design creatures and characters for telling stories, and I thought about it a lot, and I kind of came up with this kind of a process, and we'll put up the slide now. We'll move to the next slideshow because we'll pass the comedy bit. And so here it is in a nutshell: is I call it function over form over content. And when I refer to these three things, I refer to function as the overall function of a character in a movie. So, what does a character need to do in this movie? That is its function. Like, does it need to open doors or answer phones? Does it need to be scary? Does it need to be funny or wise? And so, everything we do when we design this character needs to come back to its function, so that we can go, does this fulfill the function of the movie? And it needs to fulfill the function in several different levels, either on a physical level, on a psychological level, and also on an emotional level. So those are kind of where that's from. And then moving past the function is the second part, and that's the form. And I'm really just talking about shapes here. What is the outline or the silhouette of your character? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because if we can come up with a very interesting silhouette or outline, then the stuff that follows, which is the third, the content, will follow naturally and smoothly with our form. So that is kind of what it's all about, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Is some of these three things. So, do we have questions already?
No. We're good. We're good.
All right.
So function, I'm just going to repeat it so I understand. So function is the narrative function that the creature is performing, is what you're saying. And form is the actual shape that the creature takes place. And what is content in a nutshell?
Content is just the details inside the shape. It's like the skin texture and the shape of the eyes and the stuff that follows after the form.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. You got it.
That's simple. So one of the first things I do is when I'm working on a movie is, obviously, we're going to read the script because we need to read the story. And so the first thing I do is I go through the script and I try to find all of the physical descriptions of the creature or the character, and I write those down. So that way, at least we have a basic physical description of them. And then secondly, I go through all of the functions that the creature or character needs to do in the movie. What does he have to do physically and emotionally? Does he have to scare people? Does he have to be able to swim or fly? And so we get all of those answers, and then I'm going to use all of those ideas to inform all of my decisions from that point out. So no matter what I do with my shape or other things, it's always going to come back to the function to make sure that I am able to, whatever it is, that it's able to achieve the function of the movie. And so some of the things that we want to take a look at for this is like, for instance, is what is this character? Is he an antagonist, or is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he a sidekick, or maybe he's just he's a background character? So we want to look at that and certain things like that. And also we want to look at does he have any special abilities that we needed to take into account? Does he have superpowers, or is he especially weak, or the other things that might happen in that? We want to know about his locomotion. Does he walk, fly, swim, crawl, slither? We're kind of taking a look at that, and there's a lot of things to take into account there. And also, then we get a lot of that stuff together, and then what we want to really ask ourselves, moving on, is what is the target level of realism for a movie? Because if we're making like an animated cartoon, we obviously don't want to go out and make a photorealistic character that will, not fit into that world.
Is that more under form, or is that still under function?
I'm still saying that's under function, because that's still the function of the character. Whether he obviously needs to be believable.
Okay.
But he also needs to fit inside that world.
This is
great.
great.
That's the function. That's part of the function. So that being the first one's like, should the character or creature, should it look photorealistic, as if it could actually exist in our real world? So that would be the first one. And then we move there to more of like an exaggerated character that we know wouldn't be in us here in this world, but also maybe something that like a superhero or something like that. And then, or we could go like a combination of both. We could do the exaggerated superhero type look, which would be something we might see in an animated movie. So it might be photorealistic, but also so far off the basis of reality that we are always being informed that it's in a cartoon or an animated feature.
Great.
So,
to give you just a bit of a break, and
Okay.
I want to synthesize all that, but we're having some active chat, guys. Please keep questions coming, keep comments coming. Real quick, yes or no for the producing team. I believe we are recording this, right? Yes, yeah. So we are recording this. Hopefully we'll get this up later, and that's something we'll either put in the show notes or like just replying to the invite list with. We should have something. At the very least, we'll have. I mean, Craig, if you're comfortable, we'll do like some of the outline notes.
Yeah.
But hopefully it will be the full recording. And yes, Seth Anson saying it's so cool to know that this is where monsters are made. Yeah, you are actually talking to one of like the preeminent monster makers in the industry. Not only there's very few individuals that can create monsters not only on the animatronics and like mold and sculpting side, but also on the digital side. So like he bridges the gap here. So any type of questions, like keep them coming. You're not going to get a chance like this.
Everything's game.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Okay, so function, you start with, just so I'm understanding, you start with the narrative function first.
That's correct.
And then, and like with nuts and bolts, like you're talking, doesn't pick up the phone,
What
doesn't
you
need
need
to
to physically
open.
accomplish.
Yeah. And then you go on to the physiological and the psychological and emotional.
Right.
And then at the very end, you're like, how does it fit in the world? Is it photoreal? Is it exaggerated? Oh, okay.
And some of the other things that we want to look at that may not be so obvious is when we're looking at the script is like maybe there's some kind of thematic art direction that we need to pay attention to, like especially like the genre, like whether it's going to be like in a science fiction movie or a military movie or a historical piece. Modern day horror, something like that. So we want to take that into account. Another thing that's kind of fun to take into account when you're designing your creatures and characters when you're looking at that genre is also to look at what pop culture is around and available for that genre too. So whether it be something from anime or manga,
above either.
One of those great words that our children know how to pronounce.
Yeah.
And how those can influence, and also and then one of the other things is possibly like how does history or mythology influence the thematic direction that we're going. Like perhaps maybe we're working on a Viking Norseman movie, or maybe we're working on like an ancient Mayan movie or something like that. So obviously all of the artwork and stuff that goes into those old cultures and stuff, we can like bring those and use those to our advantage as well. So, and that's kind of like some of the stuff that we
the
like
nuts and bolts of function. I like that. Yeah.
Some of the other things that you might want to think about is like, what is your target audience? Are you looking for just adults? Are you looking for kids? Are you looking for both? Obviously, if you're making a cartoon for young adults, you don't want to make a monster that's going to go out and cause them to wet their pants later because you'll have a lot of upset parents. So you want to kind of keep your target audience in mind for when you're designing this stuff, so you don't go overboard too far one way or the other. So whatever that fits into the theme that you're doing.
We're starting to get some questions in, so
right.
Guys, I will kind of do my best to filter questions that I believe are appropriate for the time. The rest of the questions I will leave to the end. So I'm seeing a lot of great questions about the industry and about jobs, but we will get to those. We'll just get to those at the end. Keep them coming. One that I feel like might be relevant here as we're talking through function. Mm-hmm. So it's like as you're starting to actually take your ideas and maybe make them visual, so actually start to put shape language on paper or start to do that stuff. I'm not sure if you're doing that yet when you're in the function phase, but we have Maria Fernanda Ruales Valdivonos. We'll say sorry that I butchered your name. She's asking what programs or what platforms do you prefer? And we have a follow-up question about for digital drawing as well. So I think there's a big question for it's like programs, and then I think a bigger question for platforms like 3D, 2D, paper, digital, whatever. So it's like, how do you start to work?
Wow, it actually really depends on my mood. A lot of times I used to just take pen to paper and start drawing on that, but obviously now sometimes I will do a quick sketch or a quick mini sculpture, and then I'll photograph that, and I'll take that into Photoshop, and I'll start adding textures to that. A lot of like one of my favorite things is like I'll take I'll make a small 3 or 4 inch sculpture, photograph it under some nice lights, and then I'll take that into Photoshop, and then I'll start taking like textures from elephant skin and stuff like that, and cutting those up and warping them and merging them into the character. So I end up about 100 small little pictures that have been cut and pasted later. I end up with this creature that has all these elephant textures and painted on him, and then a little light and shadowing and stuff like that. One of my other favorite programs for just design blue sky is a little painting program that I like called Black Ink. And it's you can download it for free. It's on Steam as well. But check it out. It's really great, free-form design paint program for that sort of stuff. And obviously we like to design stuff in 3D, so we use a lot of Autodesk Maya here. We do a lot of our sculpting inside ZBrush. It's one of the industry standard modeling programs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have to add to that?
I'm gonna just put a gold star next to a hot tip that was like a pearl that fell out of Craig's mouth was elephant skin. Elephant skin is one of the most useful Photoshop elements. It's crazy. I use it all the time too. I think people, there's also on an elephant. There's just so much great texture. So yeah, elephant skin in Photoshop is a fantastic texture to use. I also want to say I love the idea of starting traditional and then immediately moving digital. I feel like a lot of people can work really fast traditionally, and especially because that's how a lot of people grow up drawing with granddaughter. So you can do something really fast traditionally and then immediately get it into a digital space, which I like. I've noticed a lot of artists do that too.
And it has undos.
Yes, and it has undos. Yes, absolutely.
I like that part.
Yeah. Well, are we ready to move on to form? I'll keep fielding some questions.
Start talking about form next, and form is actually we're gonna go past function. We're gonna get into form in a little bit. We're gonna look at a couple things first. I'm gonna look at something that I like to call familiarity with the character, and let's go to the next slide. And we'll show
familiarity. We'll learn.
So here we have the Stave Puft Marshmallow Man from the original Ghostbusters, and one of the reasons that I think that Stave Puft works so well is that there were a couple earlier characters around that kind of like we were able to identify with, so that when we saw Stave Puft Marshmallow Man for the first time, that he was more acceptable. And one of those is our next slide. Notice the Michelin Tire Man. So if we toggle between these two slides, you can definitely see that there's a little bit, maybe they grew up in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so I think that when you design characters that have like this throwback idea for something that reminds you of your childhood and whatever, that actually can help you and help your audience help to identify the character and give it something that it didn't have before. Let's move another 2 slides ahead, and here's our little buddy, the Pillsbury Doughboy. And once again, you can see that he has very similar things to Stave Puft Marshmallow Man. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, which is.
I have a quick question.
Okay,
if that's okay. If I can hop in on familiarity specifically, or are we still going on?
We're still using it for a little bit, but go ahead if you have a question.
I know a lot of students have asked, is familiarity just kind of copying, or is it like what's the difference between familiarity? What are you trying to get?
I would say inspired. So it's not really copying something, but it's more like something that harkens back to a different era or a different age. And it may not be character specific. It might be like a genre specific thing, like maybe you design a character and maybe it has a huge steampunk element to it, and it reminds you back of like maybe some kind of steampunk game you played or steampunk movie that is out. Just something that fits into that realm. So the slide right now that we have is.
Oh, yes. We're going to adjust sound really quick. Thank you for whoever said, Owen, shouting out that we're having some audio issues. Craig, we are a little faint. Can you mute the audio while I move it real quick? All right. Thanks for bearing with us.
All right, can you hear us?
I
Is
have
all
a
okay,
feeling
Dan?
it's because I'm shouting.
Oh, okay. Should I
And
shout with you?
Craig, you're talking at a normal level. No, Craig, you're perfect. I
All
should
right.
adjust.
All right, so this the next slide up. This is Slimer Ghost from the original Ghostbusters, and before going on, I would just tell you a little bit more about this guy. His original name is actually Onionhead, and he was the ghost of John Belushi, who had passed away, who was friends with the directors and the actors of the movies. And so what we did in preparation for playing the Slimer Ghost is we watched Animal House, which featured a sequence of John Belushi in this amazing food fight, and it's hysterical. And so we kind of like did that as an homage to him. And also, one more story about him is that we used he had a big rod that to puppeteer him. He had his jaw, and there was this big rod that came down from his jaw and threw his body down to the ground. And I would lay down on my back, and I would grab this rod and I would move it up and down to operate his mouth. So, but here's what was going on: is we used real food to feed the Slimer Ghost. We used lots of gelatin and lots of mashed potatoes and breads, and all of that food would go into his mouth, through his body, and then land on my face. And so, and I had these black puppeteering costumes, and every day, by the end of the day, because of all the hot lights and stuff, I would smell like rotten food. And so I would take them off and take them to the laundromat. And the first day they charged me $5. And at the end of the shoot, 2 months later, they were charging me $40 a day to clean the gelatin out of my suit. So, but to me, one of the reasons that I felt that this Slimer Ghost works so very well was because they reminded me of a childhood game I had played in the '60s, and that was a game called The Green Ghost. So we'll go to the next slide. And here's our Green Ghost, and you can see that he kind of has a resemblance. And even the next slide is also the box art and stuff for the game. So when I saw the Slimer Ghost the first time, the first thing I thought was, oh man, this is the Green Ghost. And you really didn't know anything about the Green Ghost in this game other than it was in the '60s. It glowed in the dark. You played it in the dark, and it was fun. It kind of had that neat little retro feel to it. And by seeing Ghostbusters, we kind of answered the question, who is this little green ghost from this game? Or at least it did for me, and I thought that was kind of cool. And so that's kind of where when I'm talking about familiarity, sometimes it's something that inspires you, and you can bring a little bit of that into what you're doing. That won't hurt at all.
Yeah, and I've noticed so far for familiarity, it's through different genres other than film.
Right.
It's like
right.
it was Stay Puft was using consumer goods,
Exactly.
and Onionhead or Slimer Ghost was using board games.
Yep.
So it's like you're bringing in the familiarity from different worlds into the film medium.
Wherever you find that inspiration.
Okay.
Yeah, not necessarily from other movies and stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so that's gonna wrap that up in familiarity. The next thing I want to talk about is archetypes, and I know that we're still kind of moving around function, and we'll get back from function into the form and into the content in a little bit, but we're still having a little bit of fun with some of these other concepts. Now, archetypes would be something like, let's go ahead and bring up the next slide. So here's Strider from Lord of the Rings. So when we first meet Strider, we think of him as this like really nasty assassin kind of guy. He hangs around in a bar, and he's kind of scruffy looking, and we kind of perceive him almost as a bad guy, right? But true to a real archetype, he looks like a bad guy. And then we'll go to the next slide. But we realized after a while that this guy is actually the king of Gondor, and that he's the complete opposite of a bad guy. He's actually this guy who's going to save the whole world. And so that's what I use as like a classical archetype. But we can use these inside films, and especially when we're creating characters and creatures. And to illustrate this, now I'm going to go to the second part of what we're talking about, to form, or the silhouette and the shape. And let's go to our next slide. Here's Big Hero 6, Baymax, I think is his name. Yeah, Baymax. And we associate shapes to different things, and one of the things that I think that Baymax is really good at associating us is when we see big round shapes, we think soft and cuddly and not harmful, as opposed to when we see like spikes and stuff like that. We think claws and talons and horns and stuff that could literally puncture our skin. And so I think Baymax is a great, in terms of being a nice, soft, friendly outline character. He's very soft and very friendly. But if we go to the next slide, oops, we have once again Stay Puft. And so on one side we have Baymax, who's your buddy and friend. He's gonna if you get injured, he's gonna give you medical attention. And then the other hand, we have Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, who is also big, round, and friendly, but he would just as soon eat you and spit plasma on you than help you out. So that's a really great example of an archetype because we see this nice, friendly shape, but in the end, we realize that he is just not a friendly person at all. He's just a bad guy.
Which is serving the narrative of the function.
Right.
Yeah. So you think he's not going to be, but then he ends up being horrible.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you can use archetypes to your advantage. So what in the beginning might look like it's going to be soft and cuddly and nice turns out to be the complete opposite. And you can do the same. Something you might start out with something that looks like a big scary monster, and he looks really horrifying. But in the end of the movie, you realize that he's the best friend of the main character, and he saves the day. So it's a kind of a fun way to mislead people. And yeah, we're doing it deliberately so that we keep you guessing what's going on. And so when we look at shapes, we're looking at, when we see the round shapes, we think, soft, round, and organic. When we see like squares and rectangle shapes, we think more like industry, stuff that is man-made. Yeah,
maybe dumb.
And I think one of the reasons is for that is because when we see squares and rectangles, we're seeing all those 90-degree angles on the corners, and in nature, very rarely does a 90-degree angle happen. It's more of like a 45 or a different angle. So in nature, that's a little less than the 90. And then of course one of the last main shapes that we can talk about and look at are like the triangle shape, which are like the spike shape, which kind of carries a lot of connotations with it because it not only would look like a symbol for a tree, that kind of shape, but it also can be teeth or talons or scary things.
Yeah, sure.
And so that's going to take us to our middle section, which I call form. And so let's move to our next slide. And let's move past her. So she's a combination of round shapes and spikes. So she's kind of we got a nice round tentacles and stuff, and this kind of fits her personality in the movie because in the beginning she's Ariel's friend. She's going to help her. She's going to make her dreams come true, but at a cost. And at the end of the movie, all this nicety goes away, and she becomes a big scary antagonist for the movie. And so that is reflected in her design a little bit. All right, so the next one I'm going to go to is shapes and form. And when I talk about shape and form, I'm merely talking about the outline of the character and how it's perceived. Because we actually, when we look at a character or a person, before we see the detail in that person, we actually see the outline. We actually see the outline, and we use this every day. So like right now we have this camel crossing up because we're so used to that. We can look at a sign and we go, oh look, camel crossing. If we go to the next one, the next slide.
So we're looking at the silhouette specifically.
We're looking at
silhouettes. This is like the silhouette rule. You can tell what it is in silhouette.
Yeah, and if it looks interesting in the silhouette, then the content that's going to be inside the silhouette or the details should naturally fall in place. And that's because we have a nice silhouette to look at. So that's the first thing we see. This is outline. And like I said, I used these two previous slides to show that we actually, without thinking, we use this on a daily basis to help us, describe things. So what I like to do is when I design a character and a creature, and we get the function in, is let's go to the next slide. Let's see if we can move that down. It's the first thing I like to do, and what you can do with your characters is once you design your character, take a felt marker or a black crayon or whatever, and fill it in. So all that you see is the silhouette. And now you know, if you're looking at the silhouette with all these interesting pieces to it, you know that the content or the detail of this guy is going to fall in place. Okay. So like this creature from the Black Lagoon type character here, he looks great. When we look at his silhouette, we see all these nice little spiky bits and all these interesting talons and claws, and he doesn't even have like a rounded head or like that. He's got little spikes that break up the head and make it more interesting. And so it's a great silhouette. We love looking at it. So when we actually see the details in it, that's just going to be like bonus for us because we've already started out with this great silhouette. And so let's play a little game.
Wonderful. This is for the chat, right?
Yeah, this is for the chat.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're gonna show you a couple of slides, and we're gonna see how easy it is. Most of them are really easy, so it's not like a big challenge. But we're gonna show the power of silhouettes. So let's go to the first slide. The next one. Anybody recognize this guy?
Go chat. Type fast. Oh
yeah,
man.
E.T.
Oh, yeah.
Look
Look at that. Oh,
excellent.
Seth.
E.T.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Everybody.
Wow, we got it. Yeah. All right, we're starting off really good here. All right, let's go to the next slide.
That Seth, 10 points.
All right, who is this?
Oh man.
Wow, yeah, looking good.
Oh, right. Chief Halo. All right,
so,
I'm gonna give it to the person who says Master Chief, which looks like Connor Cook. Nice, Connor.
All right. So here's the Microsoft, the people who designed Master Chief, they spent a lot of time on his silhouette. They not only made sure that he looked good from the front, they made sure he looked good from the side and the back and from high angles and low angles. They wanted him to look great and recognizable as the Master Chief in any angle. And as we can see from this angle right here, he's got that iconic helmet design. He's got that backpack and the gun. And it all works, and we say Master Chief, even with his back is turned to us at a 3/4. Master Chief. That's that power of silhouettes and outlines, and you can totally use this to your advantage. All right, next one.
Love seeing everybody really quickly typing.
All right.
It looked like who was it? Producer Jason, can you scroll up? I need to. This is the. Miguel.
And
nice,
extra
Miguel.
points for the person who said Gojira.
Yeah.
All right. So here, okay, now let's take a look at Godzilla's silhouette here. Look at we want all these people to be really afraid and scared of Godzilla. So look at all these spikes coming out of his back, and it doesn't stop there. Spikes coming out of his back and his tail. He's got talons coming out of his toes. He's got claws coming out of his hands. He's even got big, massive shark teeth coming out. And not only that, even his shoulders have spikes on them. So this is telling us to beware, don't touch Godzilla because he will hurt you.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Let's move to the next one.
Hey. Oh, who's that? Was that Emily?
Yeah, well, if anybody had said Craig, they would have won.
Yeah.
No, it's Indiana Jones.
Actually, Craig. Yeah. Dr. Jones. Nice.
All right, good one. All right, let's go to the next one. Aha.
Ooh, Craig's favorite.
All right, Batman.
Jill, Batman. Yes.
See, now, here's a great example of archetypes for you, because Batman is made of all these sharp and spiky bits, so we shouldn't be afraid of him, but we all see Batman as he's our hero, the world's greatest detective, he's always going out getting bad guys. He's only looks frightening to bad guys because of all these spikes, so it's a great archetype type of scenario. All right, let's go to our final round, and three of them.
Oh,
all
man.
All right.
Oh, wow.
So you can get all 6 of these guys.
The last one is the one I think, maybe I know, I'm a little confused. Okay. I'm seeing people are saying Sonic. I'm seeing Mario. I'm seeing Rayman. Somebody's just saying Plush.
Plush.
Okay. Rayman Tweety. Okay, so Plush guy is the last guy. Okay. Is the last guy from Little Big Planet? Yeah. Sackboy, yes.
Sackboy.
Yeah, producer Jason got the official term. Yeah, Sackboy. Nice. There we go.
All right.
Layla
so
got Sackboy.
We've got all
nice.
of them. So once again, like you see things like, especially like Mickey Mouse, he's got all these rounded parts that tells us he's friendly. Rounded shoes, rounded head, rounded ears. But let's take one quick look at Sonic. Because Sonic has got spikes, but the spikes are rounded. So it's kind of giving us an interest in like Sonic is dangerous, yet he's also your friend. And it also kind of implies that, true to his nature, maybe the reason these spikes are curved over is because he's so fast. So maybe they would normally be spikes, but since he's so fast, they're actually being curved over from the velocity. So it's not really giving us a scary story, but it's this interesting combination of shapes that he has. All right. So enough with shapes and stuff. Let's talk about something else that's fun. Next thing I want to talk about is something called asymmetry. And let's bring up the next slide and we'll start talking about this. So asymmetry is when you create a character that has a difference between the right and left side, usually drastically different. As this picture of Arnold from the Terminator illustrates. And you might ask yourself, is it important? Does it matter which side of the face I put what on? And the answer is, yeah, it's really important. Because in Western cultures, we have a tendency to read faces like a book. So we read them from the left to the right. And so when we see something in a movie like this with Arnold and this, we see his right eye, which is a normal human eye, but then we see the left eye, which is a robot eye. So when we read this like a sentence, what we're seeing is the man that is a cyborg or the man that is a robot.
So it's man first, robot second.
And so the end of the sentence, you're left with, this is a robot.
Yeah, because you're saying like the man acts like the adjective.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is very, very important in the Terminator movies, because in the first Terminator movie, Arnold is a bad guy. So we always want you to be left thinking that he is the bad guy robot who's out to destroy John Connor. So that's the first movie. We go to the next slide. In the second movie, Arnold is a good guy. And so this was a deliberate decision on James Cameron's part to put robot on the other side, because now we see the robot that is a human, because this human's going to save the future and John Connor and everybody. And so this was a deliberate ploy on James Cameron. This is where I actually first learned about the importance of asymmetric makeups, was from working on this movie, and because we had so many conversations about it. So yes, it is important. The man that is a robot, or the robot that is a man. All right, so next slide, we'll show you just how we can just go crazy with this. This is the puppet I built for Terminator 2. His name is Donut Head, for obvious reasons. And sometimes, I wonder, like, okay, so this kind of like violates the rule, because we see the donut head that is a man, but we never get past the fact that he has this big gaping hole in his head. And so we never get to the point where we go, oh, he's a man. He's just too weird to be a man. And so that's kind of how this guy works. And I have a fun little story about how we shot this scene. This scene was just a head and shoulders puppet from here up. And I just, basically, it was a hand puppet. So I had my hand up inside the puppet, and I would turn his head to do a big reveal. He starts out when you see his left side, and he does this reveal where you see his face. And also, the actor, Robert Patrick, was the arm that portrays him. So it starts out with on the side. Robert Patrick's real arm is like this, and he pulls his arm out and reveals his face. And then we got one more puppeteer who had these rods that operated the shoulders going up and down. So the three of us had to basically hug each other in order to operate this puppet. And yeah, we all agreed that we would take showers before doing this, and we did, so it was nice. But James' instructions for this, if you look behind the head, you'll see that there's that rotating blue collision light. So James wanted it, after the head to turn, he wanted that light to show up in the middle there. In addition to that, there were these two little vertical Venetian blind sets of lights that we needed, and one of these Venetian blind lights needed to light up his left eye to bring it to life, otherwise it was going to be in the dark. And it sounds easy, and it's almost impossible when you have three guys just by rote memory trying to go like, yeah, and we nailed it on the fourth try. And we got the standard James Cameron comment, that was perfect, let's do it again. And we could never do it again. By about the 16th take, James was like literally in my face this far away going, do you know what you did wrong? Do you know what you blank did wrong? Ah! And I said, yeah, I didn't get the highlight and stuff in the right place. And he went from like, oh,
okay, well, don't do it again, or I'll kill you.
Boy.
And we couldn't get again. And then the ultimate bad thing that happens on live action set happened is we had to break for lunch without getting the shot, which means we come back from lunch and we still work on this shot. Now, most of the time we try to, in a movie set, we try to finish a shot before going to lunch because that way some of the people can come back early from lunch and get a head start setting up the next scene, like the lighters and the gaffers and the electrical people. And if you're the cause of these people not getting that head start, you're pretty much the low guy on that totem pole. So we're breaking for lunch. The whole crew hates me now, and we're walking to lunch, and we're out at this old steel mill out in Fontana, California. There's about a foot of mud out there, and I'm sloshing through the mud. Next thing you know, James Cameron shows up next to me, and it was like he's kind of laughing. Yeah, I really gave it to you back there, huh? And I was like, yeah, well, we're after this vision. And he goes, yeah. And then he told me that this is one of the signature pieces of the movie, and that this shot is going to be on the cover of magazines and et cetera, et cetera. And then he even went so far as to say this is going to be on my personal favorite magazine of all time, which is Cinefex magazine. And he was right. It made it on the cover of Cinefex, and I was very happy. We came back from lunch. We were never able to get this shot again. We gave up and we moved on. So there's the story of the donut head for the T1000. All right, so we're talking about asymmetry, and I segued onto that story. Let's go to our next one. One thing that's where it's really big asymmetry is in the DC universe, so you see quite a bit, and they've always been conscious about this. And I'm going to use they use Cyborg kind of as not only do we have this face reading, we have a little bit of an archetype going on, is because the cyborg is always he has this huge internal struggle of like, am I really a human or am I more cyborg than human? And that's kind of the way they designed him. So when you read him, you're seeing the human that is a cyborg, and that was purposely done instead of being a cyborg that is human, because we always want the audience to be questioning what he really is, because that's what his personal struggle is. Okay, next slide. To carry this on to its ultimate conclusion, here's Two-Face from the Batman universe, and as we see him in this slide, he's pretty much a normal man. He does start out as a normal man, Harvey Dent, and then he has this accent. We'll go to the next slide, and then he turns into Two-Face. Once again, they always will illustrate Two-Face with his skeletal face on his left side, so we're always seeing the man that is a monster. And this is also a deliberate decision, even though the character of Harvey Dent is always struggling between good and bad, and he's flipping his coin. The people who are familiar with him know that in his heart, evil will always win, and so that's why it's the last word that needs to be said. So he is really a monster, and he will always do something bad. So
it's amazing when you see all these rules pointed out and how often
that they happen, right? Yeah.
We are getting a sound comment that we're tapping the table.
Oh, tapping the table too much.
So
we'll get our hands off the table.
Yeah. Do that a little less.
Okay. So let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to just wrap up this form, and we're going to start talking about content now. Great. Now, and this is a really interesting kind of a creature character, and it's very obvious right from the start that he's got this big rounded shroud form going on in his primary shape. But once again, we can carry shapes and these other topics into our content. And so now we're going to move from form and talk about content a little bit. When I talk about the content, that's merely the details, like the texture of the skin, the type of eyes, and the type of mouth, and that sort of thing. And this design has some nice things happening with it. So let's go to the next slide and take another look. So as you can see, he's got this primary shape going on, but he's also got some secondary and third shapes going on that are actually in his face. And in a case like this, this really helps us determine what his face looks like, because he's got all these kind of tentacles and stuff that are coming down that kind of tell us, they're a little bit like, we don't really know what they're about, But when we see these strong structures and stuff in the face that are being outlined here, it helps us to identify, his facial features. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave you off with that.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
There's no eyes, there's no mouth, there's no any of that, but you absolutely read all that
see
in
that, you get that
because
impression
of the shape language.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, and one more slide that we can talk about detail.
Content, I guess.
Yeah, content here.
Yeah.
We'll notice that there's a sea turtle. He's got that great outline shape. He's got a little spikiness going on, but then we start to see those great secondary shapes. We see all these plates for on his back and the smaller plates, and they all have a consistency. But even more so than that, in each side of these plates, we also have like a texture pattern that is also repeating itself in a very intelligent fashion through this creature. So we're going from the large to the small, and everything is continuing to make sense all the way down to the smallest detail, how it all ties in. So how do we do this in practice? How do we design creatures and give them to directors, and so they can make intelligent choices and stuff like that? And I'll tell you, this is kind of my personal technique. I usually start out by I do 3 sets of designs, okay? And each one of these these 3 sets of designs are going to have anywhere between 3 and 5 character drawings in them, okay? And so the first 3 that I do are what I would call very traditional drawings. So like, for instance, if we were going to create a dragon for a movie, our first 3 to 5 designs would be very traditional dragons that you would see with the scales and the leathery wings and the necks and the stuff that you would see that we always associate with dragons. So we do those. Then my next 3 drawings or 5 drawings were what I would call high concept drawings, okay? So take those drawings and just take them a little bit further. Like, what would a dragon look like if it had dragonfly insect wings, for instance, or maybe it had fish scales, or maybe it was fish bait or something like that. So we're gonna take it still very recognizably a dragon, but we're gonna take it to that next level. And then the last level, the last group of drawings are what I call jumping off a cliff designs. They're so out there, like we'll make a dragon that's consistent all of bones. We'll make a dragon that is made of pots and pans or whatever. It's just completely out there, has nothing to do with anything else. Just we jumped off a cliff with these designs, and then when you get like these 9 drawings together, you present them to the director and the art director, and they'll look at them and they say, we like that, we don't like that, or maybe they don't like any of them.
Sure.
But even if they don't like any of them, at least you know what they don't like. So you actually are moving forward. A lot of times they'll do like, oh, I like this from this dragon, and like this from this dragon, and this from this dragon, and then you can take those back and you can design dragons with those parts and a couple of different variations of those. One thing you do want to avoid is giving them too many designs, because if you walk in there with like 3 and 3 designs, that's great. They can look at those and they can make decisions. But when you start throwing in like 20 designs, all of a sudden they have so many choices they actually can't make a decision. And that's not always the case. There are a lot of very, very visionary directors out there like James Cameron and Ron Howard and Steven Spielberg, who know exactly what they want, and they're able to describe visually to you and tell you what they want. And then, like in the case of James Cameron, he's also an excellent artist in his own right, and he will give you drawings, so that solves the mystery. But there are a lot of directors who aren't as visual as some of these main guys, and so you need to help them out and create these designs so that they can pick and choose and help hone them into what they're looking for. Because we always need to remember, in the process of telling the stories, we are trying to create the director's vision for this movie, and that's the person we should be the last word.
All right, I'm gonna just
Please
circle
do.
it back a little bit. Even if you're not working for a director and you're doing your own designs, I think doing those 9 things at the beginning is absolutely helpful. That way you're not stuck in what everybody else is doing, but you're also not so crazy, and you can be your own director. I think doing that iterative design process is so important now. Wonderful. Are we? That was fantastic.
Yeah, that's it. We're now we can take questions and have fun and tell funny stories.
Awesome.
So
I have a few questions, and I'm in the studio, so I get to just
you get to
take
start
it off right away, and then everybody else. If you asked questions earlier, feel free to ask them again. I know you have a lot of questions about the industry and about the job, and there were some questions about NYFA in there. We're going to try to get to everybody's. We have some time now, I believe. Yes, we have some time. So continue asking questions. I'm going to ask a few, and then we'll get to the chat. So you were kind of, I mean, I think there was an implied order and an implied importance, but I would love for you to talk just a little bit about the chronology of function over form over content, and when you know it's good to move to the next phase.
Everything you do, every single aspect of your design process, you need to reflect back to the function. So once you set up your function of your character, then you go to the form, and every decision that you make about the form and the silhouette should be a part of the function of the character, or should be like if I make these spikes on this character and he's mean and nasty looking, but he was supposed to be a good guy in the film, did I really, I made a cool design, but did that design, which is a great shape, did that fulfill the function of the story, which is a friendly guy? And so it would be function, and then the form, silhouette, and then the detail, because we really want to see the detail, the function, or not the function, but the silhouette of the character, because that's so important, so strong. And then the detail we see in after that, or the form, or the content is going to follow that.
Great. Okay, and then to just dive maybe into these individual elements a little bit, the importance and the chronology within elements itself. So it's like let's take function at the beginning. You were mentioning narrative function, psychological function, and emotional function.
Yeah, and physical function.
And physical function, the physiology. Yeah. Do you tackle all those at the same time? Is there one you place most important?
Well, I usually put right at the top. I put physical function at the very top, because he absolutely needs to believably, physically accomplish in a movie what he says. If he needs to go open a door and he's got big sickle fingers and he can't open a door, you kind of lost your audience there, because he can't actually open a door with a hand like that. So then you immediately need to go back and figure out, how can I open this door? I believe actually my suggestion in the beginning of this to those people at the previous house was, I said, if he needs to pick up a phone, maybe if you just add a thumb to these talons, he could pick up the phone with that and call. And they thought, wow, that's a great idea, but we still worked ourselves into a hole, so we need to redesign. So something like that.
Okay,
so always come back to the function.
And I mean, it's also, you hit on something else really interesting that I would love to kind of pick apart. When do you know when to abandon design? We talk, I think, a lot with our students, where sometimes it's like, hey, it's okay to start over. It's okay to do it. So when do you alter? When do you abandon and start over?
When you realize that you might become in love with this design. It might be great, and you think it's the best thing in the world, but no matter what you do, there's no way you can make this design function in the world that it needs to be in. And at that point in time, you need to just reflect. Or maybe your functions aren't what they think they are, and you need to rethink what the functions are of this character. But you always need to come back to that in order for it to believably work.
Thank you for indulging my questions. We're going to hop to the chat right now a little bit. So we're going to start off with, if you scroll just up a little bit, Jason, right there. Yeah. Okay. So this is from Jill. We're going to get to the NYFA specific animation as well, but we're going to start with the umbrella top. This is from Jill. She says, for starting up in animation, do you recommend learning a certain program?
Yeah, I do actually.
Okay. What's your program?
I'm going to recommend Maya.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I think it depends what they mean by animation.
That's true. If it's 3D animation versus 2D animation.
I'm in a second Maya. Maya is the industry standard right now, and I think a lot of the tools you learn will be. But I'm going to say any artist, no matter what, even if they're live action or anything, needs to know Photoshop. I think Photoshop is the #1 thing to start learning. So much so that I've noticed certain programs almost assume you know it when you hit the ground.
Yeah.
There's
Photoshop's
nothing,
one of those.
Yeah, there's nothing more useful, like from a graphic design standpoint, from selling your ideas, from art, from drawing. Even if you're not a traditional artist, knowing Photoshop is extremely important.
Yeah, never heard.
Yes. Okay. Next question from Catherine. How important is it to study anatomy to create 2D and 3D people and creatures?
Well, I think it's very important, and I'll tell you, my background before I ever did this stuff is I was an X-ray technician, and I went to school and I studied anatomy and physiology, and I actually have a really great knowledge of skeletons because I was an X-ray technician, and I know how skeletons move, and that became very important for helping me inform my decisions when I was making puppets, and also when you're a character rigger, rigging the skeletons in CG. If you know where the placement of the bones are in the human body, it's actually going to help you and inform you to create way better character rigs than if you're just sticking a bone in the middle of a joint. If you put, like, for instance, a knee joint, you could just stick that knee bone in the middle of the knee and it would work. But if you cheat it slightly forward like a real knee is, you're actually going to get some better motion. So yeah, I think anatomy and physiology are very important. And I also like something along that same lines is when you're looking at puppeteering or your performance for your digital performance, I try to bring as much of the real world as I possibly can. For instance, if I'm animating birds, I like to watch birds flying. I own parrots. Like, for instance, the raptors on Jurassic Park. Our only performance that was given us to by Steven Spielberg is Steven told us he wanted the raptors to have bird-like motion, and that was it. That was all. And having owned a parrot, I went back and I thought, okay, I'm going to move him like my pet Amazon green cheek parrot, and that worked pretty well. Um, and they seem to like that. And some of the other puppeteers also own birds, and so we were able to incorporate that. But when we going back to familiarity, there was a scene in Jurassic Park where I wanted to do this. It's the famous shot. It's where the raptor is in the kitchen and he's looking through the little porthole window, and he's looking in the kitchen. He looks in with his eye and looks in with one eye, and then he turns his head and tilts it. My inspiration from that was actually from another movie. It's from my favorite movie of all time called Alien. And in the end of Alien, Sigourney Weaver's racing out of the spaceship with the cat carrier, with Jonesy in this cat carrier, and she comes around a corner and she sees the alien. She drops the cat carrier with Jonesy in it and runs away. And then it cuts this amazing shot from inside the cat carrier's point of view of the alien looking in on this cat, and the alien's doing this little slight twisting of the head, which to me just said, "Oh my gosh, this alien is so intelligent, really smart. He's trying to figure out what's going on." And I thought that was really cool. So on this Interraptor head for this shot, had me operating the head. There was another guy who operated the jaw, another guy operated the eyes. And I said to him, "Hey, you know the shot from Alien? Let's do that shot." And we were all very secret about it. I want to do it next. And so we did. We did that shot. And I start tilting the head, and somebody in the background, the crew, starts yelling out, "You're tilting the head! You're tilting the head!" And then Steven Spielberg says, "It's like Alien. I love it." And that's the shot you see in the movie. So it was based on some bird movement and also on some reference to my favorite movie, Alien, where it inspired me. So that's kind of where we got to that shot. So.
Awesome. I think you implicitly answered the next question.
All right.
But for those of us that aren't X-ray technicians, Christopher's asking, any advice for learning anatomy?
Yeah, draw it and sculpt it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Go take a sculpting class or a life drawing class, and actually, like the classes we do here at NYFA, we have traditional. When you're in our animation program, we actually start out with traditional drawing and traditional sculpting classes. And one of the things we do is we have you model your own head, and we start from the ground up. We actually have you model your skull first, and then put muscle structure, and then we put the skin on top. And so you get a great lesson on anatomy and physiology just by doing that, and we move on from there, and then we go to the digital sculpting. But yeah, everything you can grab from real life, watching nature videos and stuff like that, it'll all help inform you to your choices for creating characters and how they move.
All right, we have a few more kind of nitty-gritty creature questions, and then we can get into the bigger industry questions and education questions that I see coming down. One, just a quick question. Would you recommend Blender?
I would recommend Blender if only if you don't have access to Maya. Um, uh, I just came back from doing a week-long seminar in Moscow, Russia, and in that deal I taught an opening workshop for Intro to Maya. Now, one of my students there, he had been using Blender for like the last year, and he quickly sailed right to the top of the class because for him, most of the stuff in Maya was not actually new concepts. It was just review. So yeah, Blender's free and it's great, and you can go learn it, and that's great. But also, for the most part, almost everybody can go to the company that makes Maya, which is Autodesk. You can create a free account with them, and then you can download Maya for free on your computer for like 3 years with a student account.
Absolutely.
And so I would definitely recommend going that route. Now, my Blender student in Russia, he loved Blender and he was very, very jaded because he thought Blender was great, and it is. It's not a bad program. And then I turned him loose on Maya, gave him a few instructions, and the first thing he said was, the animation tools in Maya are so much better than anything else he's ever seen. So there's that testament from a Blender user who who started using Maya.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Also, the program you learn on is not going to be the program you use forever. Programs are going to change constantly.
Yeah.
Forever.
Don't fall in love with your software.
Yeah.
It will go away.
Yeah. But Maya now, like 5 years ago, yeah, unless it's Photoshop. Photoshop's not going to change.
It's never gone anywhere.
Blender maybe 5 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, learn it. But now Maya is pretty much free to learn. So I would do Maya as well. All right. Then before we move, there was one more creature question. I think this is from Connor. If you're making a creature off of a pre-existing monster, so think the stereotypical monsters like werewolf, vampire, Frankenstein. He added Velociraptor in there.
Right.
Do you have any tips on making those monsters stand out with making them too different from their source?
Yeah, try to find a different angle on it. Like, I know this will sound really weird, but like most of the time when you see like a werewolf, you're thinking something that's a derivative from an actual wolf, or maybe like a German Shepherd or something. But what if your werewolf was a corgi? And it sounds really funny, but what if you can make a really cool, convincing corgi type of werewolf that looked like that? And my producer's laughing. But you get the idea. I worked on this movie a long time ago called Fright Night, and in this movie, we were making fun of this other movie called Dr. Sardonicus because this old movie called Dr. Sardonicus had this person with a really, really bad smile makeup. It's like this appliance that made them look like they're smiling like this big, and we thought, man, there's like no way you could make this makeup look good or believable. But then Steve Johnson, who was like the guy who was in charge of the thing and also a very amazing, talented person, he took that gauntlet. He went out and sculpted his own really amazing version of this Dr. Sardonicus, and it worked, and it was great. And we actually ended up using it in Fright Night in the movie as just kind of a little bonus gag. So yeah, it can be done.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, also to just go back early in the lecture, the high concept sketches, those 3 high concept sketches, feel like a great way to immediately break that mold. Or a personal challenge, like Craig was saying.
Yeah, instead of scales, give it feathers. Yeah. I mean, we've seen dragons with feathers before, but it's another concept that can be explored and stuff like that.
All right, maybe we do some lightning round questions right now to finish out creatures. What do you recommend? Anything different for invertebrate creatures?
Invertebrate creatures?
Yeah, stuff that doesn't have skeletons.
Definitely would look at as much real life stuff that you possibly can, like jellyfish, for instance. How do jellyfish locomote themselves? Are they jet propelled? You might consider that. Something that I like to play is I like to create an imaginary world. I'm not sure how well this fits into the question, but when you create an imaginary world, like let's make a planet that's made up of hydrogen sulfide and sulfur, right? So obviously something like delicate like your eye lenses and your eyes would not be able to exist in an environment like that because they would get eaten. So you'll need to come up with some kind of like, how would a creature see and move around like that? And of course, instantly you start thinking like echolocation and sonar. So maybe you're going down those roads instead.
I like
design.
propulsion. I feel like you hit it right with that suggestion. Think about how
Yeah.
an invertebrate moves, and that's absolutely going to dictate how it looks.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
If you can find something in nature, then jump off from nature. Always, as much real life as you possibly can is always going to help you, because the audience is going to see that, and they'll see something that's based off of real life, and they'll be able to make that connection. So.
All right. Also, producers and NYFA representatives, if you want to highlight any questions that you feel like we should get to, you absolutely can. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of go through stuff. I don't know. I think so. Yeah. Try it. Yeah. So if you want to do that, then okay, cool. I think we're going to start to move on to more industry-related questions and future-facing questions. Can you scroll up a bit? Because I know we had some. Okay. Is there a way to rewatch the stream? Yes, we are recording. We're going to try to send an email out with it. If there is not a way to rewatch it, we're going to send notes from the stream, so that way you can have something to go off of. So what is the best way to get your start as a high school student who wants to prepare for this industry? Going into film/TV art seems intimidating. So high school student advice for high school students.
I'm not sure if this is right, but
what's that? Sorry, I should give them credit. Kamani Adams. Thank you for the question, Kamani.
When I was in high school, I decided I wanted to come to Hollywood and make monsters when I was in the 5th grade. So my whole focus from life from the 5th grade was to move down here and do this. And my approach to high school and my classes were every class I took was like, what in this class can I learn that will benefit me on how to make monsters and how to create creatures or to tell stories? And that's the way, like when I would take a math class, I go, oh, I'm going to have to learn how to use a triple beam measure, so I should probably learn how to convert from grams to ounces and get good at weights and measures and stuff like that. Obviously, in English classes, we concentrated on good story structure and what makes a good story and what makes a story interesting. When I was taking anatomy and physiology, obviously that was very key, because how do things move, and what's the skeletal structure. So everything I did in high school was geared towards how can this help me with my future job, and that's kind of how I looked at it. Of course, nowadays, back in those days, it was before the internet, it was before computers. It was, we had 3 channels on television, and we had a set of Encyclopedia Britannica, ask your parents. But nowadays, we have YouTube, and you can go onto YouTube and these other online, and you can watch hours and hours of videos on how to do things and how to get started, and how things work. And there's just the resources out there that are available to you now. It's just amazing. It's great. So I would take advantage of that. So.
Yeah. I agree. I would say on top of learning how to, become obsessed with the industry as well. So also research not only how to do stuff in the industry, but what the industry is doing and why it's doing it. That way you can stay fresh with your tools and kind of be future facing, because you guys will be the future of the industry. Don't learn what the industry is doing, learn what the industry is going to want to do.
It's going to do, yeah.
Especially important for high school students. Okay, for NYFA. So here we go. Any advice for a portfolio for NYFA? Advice to work also in the animation industry, and advice on getting into NYFA. Love from Florida. Thanks, Kylie. So advice about getting into NYFA and NYFA portfolios.
Take it away.
I guess we review them a lot. You're getting advice. I think the 3 people that look at portfolios are currently in this room. So I'm going to start off a bit on what I like to see, and then maybe I'll ask for some advice also behind the camera. The thing that talking about like doing stuff that other people aren't doing, the thing that I really notice is digital. I really, really love to see digital work. Of course, send your traditional, but I want to see that you are computer literate and can create art using a computer as well. Not that the traditional stuff's not important, but I would love to see digital stuff, and I would love to see more stuff in motion. Ultimately, our medium is a medium of motion and of movement. So seeing that you can make your art move and you can animate your art is extremely important. Everybody's pretty good on the digital stuff, so it's not that that's important. I just love to see, or sorry, everybody's very good on traditional stuff. I just love to see more digital, and I love to see more stuff in motion. Amy or Craig, I don't know if you guys have more.
One thing I want to add to that too is you also need to write a written statement, provide us like a page, 2-page like written statement that talks about yourself and your life. And I read all of those. And the things that I really like when I see those come out is I like hearing what you did growing up, or what TV shows inspired you to do this, and what you're passionate about. I'm really looking to see what your passion is in these letters, like what what movies were your favorite, what did you watch, and what do you like doing, and why you did that. And I know it can be even more so than your artwork. It can be very intimidating because you have to sit down and you have to write a page and a half, and you don't really know the structure, and you're afraid that someone like me is going to read it and judge you. And really, don't, when you're making these written statements, have fun with it and just speak from your heart, and let your passion sort of show through, because that's what I'm looking for. So.
Any advice from behind the camera that I can repeat? Okay,
All
we're getting
right.
thumbs up from our
Right.
admissions representative. Kylie has a follow-up question, which is, can creative writing be useful? So it's like, where does creative writing kind of fit in this visual world?
Absolutely, yeah, because your imagination is the most important thing, obviously, and developing that, I think, through writing is one of the greatest things you can do. So yeah, one thing I do when I create a character is not only do I create this character, but I created the entire world that it might be from. I create the entire biomes, from the floral and the fauna that this creature, if he's on an alien planet or like Pandora or something. I figure out, where is this creature on the food chain? Is he a predator? Is he at the top of the food chain? Is he at the bottom? Can he be taken out by a simple single cell creature from that world, like an infection or something? All that stuff will help us inform our design process. What is right down to things like, what is the creature's reproductive cycle? How do these creatures reproduce? All these things will help inform you designing your characters and creatures. So.
Great. There was a question from a little bit back, and I missed it, but it's one of the most popular questions I feel like we get, which is about Pixar and DreamWorks. How to work in one of those legendary studios, and any advice for people starting out on how to get there.
Oh, well, yeah, and if you want to be an animator and you want to go to one of those two places and animate, just animate and animate and animate. So you're most likely, the likelihood of you of going from school to getting a job straight at Pixar or at DreamWorks or Disney is not, I'm just going to be realistic, it's not very high. But that being said, it's a lot easier that you can go to like visual effects companies, and visual effects companies need a lot of animators. I mean, look at all the Marvel movies that are out recently, and there's a lot of character animation and creature animation going on in those, and they want photorealistic animation, so it is a challenge. So I would look at the little boutique places. I would look at the credits. I would read Cinefex. I would look at the ones that are actually doing the sort of things that you want to do, like like a company that might be more headstrong with animation than the visual effects. I would look at them, and then I would gear my reel accordingly. But if you're doing animation, you just need to animate, and also one of the things that we're always telling our students at NYFA is to use reference. If you're doing a dialogue scene, go grab your quick cam and shoot yourself, so you have a great reference, because you're going to see subtleties in motion of yourself that you're never going to get if you're just trying to wing it without it. You can add to that.
I think on the DreamWorks Pixar side of things is I think people want to work at DreamWorks and want to work at Pixar because those are the two they can name. I don't want that being your dream unless you can name 20 other animation companies. At the point that you can do that, then I will actually believe that you want to work at DreamWorks or Pixar. So even though I think that's mainly the ones you're seeing, go out, do research like Craig is talking about, and then once you've done your research, if you still want that, then that's a whole other conversation. Okay, some other questions. All right. How can I start learning 3D animation in high school? I'm a freshman, so I have time to learn.
Download Autodesk Maya.
Absolutely. I think that's where we're starting.
Yeah, Autodesk Maya. Go to YouTube.
Yeah.
Also,
Oh,
our
Twitch stream.
we have a Twitch stream. We also have a resource page of free resources on our NYFA website. And one of those cool resources that you can download for free on our site is this great stork rig that was you laugh.
I do laugh.
Yeah. But if you want to look at like what a professional caliber character rig looks like, we have a rig on our reference our resource site that you can download and you can use. And that way you don't need to spend a lot of time rigging and creating these rigs. You can actually load one in and start playing around with it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We have a bunch of free assets. What is the animation program called? Maya. It's MAYA. Autodesk is the company that makes it. That's kind of the default right now. This is from a teacher. What suggestions? This is from Anne. What suggestions do you have for me? I teach animation at high school. What should I be teaching these kids?
Oh, definitely the 12 Principles of Animation.
Sure.
Definitely start with that. That's the classic stuff.
Illusion of Life by Disney. Yeah. I think basing a curriculum off the 12 Principles of Animation would be an amazing experience for a high schooler and something you can easily wrap your head around. Also, I feel like the younger the students are, the more tendency they have to overscope. A very nitty-gritty tip for beginning animators, and this is for everybody too. There was a question earlier where it's like, I'm just starting animation, like what should I be focusing on? I would say don't do animations that are over 60 frames long. I want to cap that right now for like the first 2 or 3 months of you doing animation. Like 24 to 60 frames is where you should be living. That should be the clips you're doing. Simple stuff done perfectly is how you learn. So don't worry about doing these crazy fight scenes or backflips. Like if you can get something simple in 60 frames done, even if it's just a character jumping, that's way better. So same for teaching. If I was teaching animation, I would limit it to 60 frames. I do teach it, and I do limit it to 60 frames. They just dropped the animation class in my high school. Oh no, Jill, I'm so sorry. Tune in Tuesdays. It says 7 o'clock. I should know this. 7:30 for NYFA School, where we do you hear a lot more of these talks from the industry, and there's just tons of great resources on YouTube and tons of free stuff out there for you to learn. Were there any? I feel like there were a few other questions we missed. Do you recommend any third-party software to use in conjunction with Maya? Photoshop, but other than Photoshop should be used for texturing in Maya.
If you can afford it, V-Ray.
V-Ray right now is probably one of the best third-party renderers. I professionally, in my work, use Octane. That's a little. I think the more professional version of Octane is Redshift. None of my clients are listening. Octane is also very professional, though. But yeah, I think the first third-party thing you should learn is a renderer. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to rely on the Maya default renderers. So if you're going to go third-party, learn a renderer first. V-Ray is great.
Yeah, because the renderers do have a bit of a learning curve to them, and so the sooner you get started with those, the better off you'll be.
Yeah, and that's how you get finished work. So it's very important.
Also, I'm going to plug our summer high school programs. If you're a high schooler, we have a program in the summer. I think it runs, 4 weeks?
4 weeks.
And we teach you the basics of stop motion and modeling and animation in Maya and a bunch of other stuff.
It's the entire pipeline. You learn the entire 3D pipeline, everything. A lot of live action. You learn it's an incredible amount stuffed into a very small amount of time. Yeah. Oh, this is a great question. Also from Jill, and I think I may have seen it from somebody earlier, or producer Jason scrolled up and found it. Want to get into 3D animation or game design? Do you think it would be useful to learn how to code?
Yes. Yeah, it always helps to be able to do a little bit of coding, especially in this realm. It's good to know a little bit of Python, and it might be helpful to know a little JavaScripting. Especially if you're going into games, you're definitely going to want to have a little bit of coding experience under your belt. One of the engines that we use here a lot for developing games is the Unity engine, the Unity game engine, and also the nice thing about that, it's also free to download and use, and you can get started on that. And that uses a lot of JavaScripting, I believe, as well.
Unity.
And Unity.
Yeah,
and
and
it's got a little bit of C# or something
Yeah,
like
C#
that.
I think.
But yeah, definitely having a little exposure to coding is going to work in your benefit.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
there's tons of free resources out there. Start with Python. I think Craig's right. Start with Python and go from there. Micah says, I've been learning animation for about a year and a half. Nice, great. That's like a good time to start applying for internships and things like that. Using Cinema 4D. I will say that's probably one of the classic learning ones, especially it used to be.
Super pretty renderers.
Yeah. Used mainly for motion graphics. Starting to learn Maya. And what would you recommend doing for projects to help grow and scale? So it's like Maya projects to get the most bang for your buck.
Oh wow, I would definitely like try to like if you're depends on like if you're trying to specialize in one thing, I would definitely go down that road. Like if you're going to specialize in animation, obviously go through and come up with as many exercises that you can to illustrate those 12 principles of animation to help you get a good grounding in those. If you're going to go a different route, like maybe you want to be a character rigger or a compositor or something like that, then it might be a little bit different route.
Yeah, I'm going to say what not to do, and then you can say everything else is good. What I wouldn't recommend doing is like coming up with an idea, like being like, oh, I want to see a shark underwater, like jump out and bite a surfer, and then be like, okay, I'm going to have to model the shark, and I'm going to have to do the liquid simulation, and I'm going to have to do. Don't do like a soup to nuts process where you're doing your own modeling and your own rigging and your own animation. Like it's fine if you want to learn all that, but if you want to model, I would say just model one thing, and then consider that done. And then if you want to rig, take somebody else's professional model that you download online and rig that. That way you're just eliminating stuff that can go wrong. Because if you're trying to teach yourself the whole pipeline on your own work right from the beginning, if you mess up in the modeling, that's going to affect your rigging. It's going to affect your UVs. It's going to affect you're like, oh, I'm a horrible animator.
It's going to come back to haunt you later.
That might not be the case.
Yeah.
You'll get there. I'm just saying don't start by doing the whole pipeline yourself. Is the big no-no for learning Maya.
There are plenty of resources on site. There's even like sites that have nothing but free rigs that you can download.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's tons of amazing stuff. Like type in Maya free rigs and you'll get amazing stuff to practice animation with. Same thing with models. All right. Kylie asks, what NYFA school would be ideal to have the best experience? Miami, New York, etc. I feel like they're all great. Do you have opinions?
Well, we don't have animation in Miami.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Right there.
And then in New York, it's
there's no one here.
Yeah. If they want to get a degree, they should come to the
I'm going to repeat exactly what Amy said in case you didn't hear. So the different studios or different schools are based upon different programs being offered. Sorry, Craig, we're almost done. Craig, you want to get some water? While Craig gets some water, New York doesn't have a BFA program, but they do have an animation program. Miami actually does not have an animation program. So we do kind of customize the programs to where the hubs are. So it's like there's a big animation hub in Los Angeles, and there's a hub in New York, so that's why we have our animation schools there. Okay, is that good? Do we feel good about that? Okay. I want to get into a VFX school. Should I study animation or production? Both, I think, is the answer. I think both, but this goes to what we were saying before, where don't do the entire animation pipeline. Again, I look at portfolios. It's fun, and I used to do it, but filming yourself for production and then using yourself in VFX, you end up just having that again and again and again. We're talking about advice for doing visual effects. Should they study animation or production? Which I'm assuming should they study animation or like live action production? And the short answer is both.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, I wouldn't necessarily do the soup to nuts thing. Like if you're like really working on a specific type of visual effects, you can find live action plates that are shot really high quality. Use those professional live action plates rather than spending the time to necessarily shoot yourself and then learn live action completely separate. Putting stuff together, it just compounds the chance of error. It's my advice. yes, there's a tremendous amount to learn in both. So kind of keeping them a little bit separate. And I think a lot of people would actually disagree with me. They would say just learn the whole thing together. But keeping them a little bit separate, I think, helps you learn faster. All right. I feel like that wraps it up for all our questions. Craig, you came back just in time.
Awesome.
Yeah. We're about to kind of sign out. Just, again, a real quick thank you to the All-American High School Film Festival.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again for helping make this possible. Thank you to producer Jason and admissions representative Amy for helping out with fielding questions.
Yay.
And again, organizing this. Jason's making this possible. Amy's the one that put all this together. Thank you, guys. And a huge thank you to the man of the hour and a half, Craig. Craig, thanks for being here and sharing your
Matt,
expertise.
thanks for being with me.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to see more NYFA content, I believe we are going to do more of these virtual workshops, as well as you can tune in Tuesdays on our Twitch channel, which is NYFA Games, to see interviews from the industry. I believe Amy left her email in there, so any additional questions that we didn't get to, send it to Amy. Amy will make sure it gets to us. Wonderful.
Our Instagram account?
Yeah, Instagram. You can follow us on Instagram at
NYFA_animation_games.
Rolls right off the tongue. Yeah, NYFA_animation_games. You can go check out student work, and you can see what a first semester student work versus the last semester student work. It's kind of great. It's a wonderful learning experience. Request to make a Discord server. That's really interesting for virtual workshops. I think Amy's getting right on that right now. I'm going to promise you Amy's going to create that. Absolutely. Discord, great. And guys, thank you for the recommendation. If you guys want to see content like that, man, a lot of people are about this Discord. Discord's awesome. Can't deny that. It's a great place for fans and collaboration to happen. So, yes, if you have other recommendations like Discord, please send them along. All right. Big thanks. Everybody's thanking you, Craig.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for
wonderful.
For tuning in. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it means a lot. Thanks, guys. Thanks. All right.
Thanks.
We'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for looking.